You shouldn't have to read this whole book before you run this adventure. Look at how many pages this thing is. One solution is just to not run any long pre-written modules, but if we always gave up after the first version, then we wouldn't have The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Oh, wait, I proved the wrong point. But we can make adventure modules better. I'm going to show you my proposal for a no prep adventure layout by going through the adventure that I made that uses this layout, and then show you how you can play it for free using the sponsor of today's video, Legend Keeper. The adventure has lots of cool stuff in it that you can use in your own adventures, like a combat encounter that has a secondary objective and allows you to adjust the balance of the encounter on the fly, and a puzzle that has a failsafe built in case it stumps your players. I'm also going to share some tips on how to make mysteries and create clues for your games. Wow, there's a lot of stuff to get to. Welcome to the table. I'm Kelly, and I'm going to talk about a flowchart like it's a new thing I just invented. I've only run one large pre-written module all the way through, which was Storm King's Thunder. When I began preparing to run it, I saw that the intro said I should familiarize myself and read the module before running it. I then saw that the book had 256 pages in it, at which point I closed the book and absolutely did not read it. I ran the module by reading a couple of chapters at a time before the session to familiarize myself with the story in short sections. But the downside of that was I was afraid to deviate from the book because I didn't know which characters were important and which weren't in the overarching story, and I also couldn't foreshadow future events or give hints to my players because I only knew what was happening one chapter in advance. If there had been a short chapter at the beginning of the book that had summarized the important events and information for the whole module, I could understand the bones of the story quickly before running it, and then I could work through the book as we played and still get all the juicy flavor. This would also have another benefit, which I'll touch on in a second. Today we're looking at my Divine Assassins one-shot that was voted on by my patrons. Thank you so much to all my patrons. You're part of the reason I get to spend more time on the channel and make cool stuff. The first page has some world building text and explains how the no prep system works. Then the second page is really the only thing you should need to read ahead of time before the adventure. Obviously this is a bit easier with a short adventure, but I'll also go over how this idea could work for a larger module. The no prep page, or I guess the prep page, I'm not sure what to call it, but this page starts with the introduction and setup for the adventure and any information the players need to know right away. Then it moves into the patent pending clue diagram, also known as a flowchart. To me, this is the easiest and clearest way to see the different paths your players might take through the adventure and which clues lead to which locations. If you break it down, pretty much every campaign ever is just your players going to a place, getting a piece of information that tells them where to go next, going to that next place, getting the next piece of information, and so on for years, so a flowchart seems like a great way to organize that. Moving through the flowchart, we can see all the clues or pieces of information that the players can learn in order to progress. Then it shows which locations lead to which other locations, and that eventually all clues lead to the storehouse where the final showdown takes place. The last section shows you what you'll need for the combat encounter, including the stat blocks that this adventure uses, and the mechanics for the portal. The rest of the pages are all the flavor, including place descriptions, NPC descriptions, suggested difficulty checks, and a puzzle. Because you have the skeleton of the adventure right here, you can take these clues and this combat encounter and slot them into your campaign in a way that better suits your story or setting, which is the additional benefit I mentioned earlier. You could have this adventure take place in a big city instead of a small town, or it could even take place in a cyberpunk setting. Just swap out the place names and professions, like a tech workshop instead of a magic shop, and a hydroponic farmer instead of a miller. Before we talk about how this format would work in a larger module, and some tips for organizing clues in a mystery, I want to show you how you can get this adventure for free inside Legend Keeper. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video. Legend Keeper is an extremely powerful but easy to use campaign management platform. It has so many features that I'm not going to be able to go over them all, but luckily they're offering an extended 30-day free trial for anyone who uses the code PowerWordSpill at checkout. They even have a feature that let me build my no prep flowchart right on the platform, but we'll get to that. I think the coolest feature is the auto linking. Legend Keeper automatically scans your text as you write and links to other documents with that name. If you type the name of a town, it automatically links to your document on that town and shows a small preview when you mouse over it. This is an absolute game changer. Before we talk about the nested interactive maps that you can make and the brand new import and export feature that they just released, I want to show you the tool that you can use to make really easy clue and event diagrams to map out your entire campaign. The whiteboard tool is great for planning campaigns, arcs, or adventures because you can lay out all the events, locations, and clues in an easy-to-read flowchart format. I've recreated my No Prep page here as a whiteboard, so if you import this adventure into your Legend Keeper account and run it, this is all you need to look at before the adventure. Speaking of importing, Legend Keeper has just released an import and export tool. You can import from a bunch of different sources like an Obsidian Vault, World Anvil export, a folder of text files, Markdown files, or HTML files. Legend Keeper also has a robust export tool to a variety of formats, including Markdown or their own LK format. The LK format is what I've exported the one-shot in, so it comes complete with the ready-made interactive maps and the whiteboard ready to go. If you'd like to run this one-shot, head to the link down in the description and use the code PowerWordSpill at checkout to get an extended 30-day free trial. Once your account is set up, just download the one-shot file from the description and import it into your Legend Keeper account, and away you go. Before we look at some tips for organizing clues in a mystery adventure, and how to make sure your players don't instantly solve your mystery, let's look at how this no prep format could work in a larger module. The first chapter would have a short section describing the premise of the campaign and the inciting incident. Then there'd be a section on who the most important characters are, including the BBEG, and what each of those characters' goals are. And the last thing in the chapter would be either a diagram or short paragraph descriptions of the main locations of the campaign and which pieces of information move the overall story forward. This first chapter would only deal with the high level stuff. Then each of the chapters would have an intro page or two with the same information but on a more granular level for that particular chapter, similar to the no prep page in this adventure. If a module adopted a format like that, would it make you more likely to run a pre-written campaign? Let me know down in the comments. The best advice I heard for mysteries and clues is to make sure you have multiple clues that lead to the same place. I believe Brennan said that on an adventuring party episode, but I'm not completely sure. That one piece of advice has helped me immensely. Not only does this ensure that my players will find at least one of the clues, but it also emphasizes the importance of the information. For example, if your characters hear a rumor that shadowy creatures have been seen lurking out by the old abandoned barn, they might go check it out, but maybe there's more interesting stuff going on in town. But if they also hear that someone went to the barn and hasn't been seen since, and they also find fresh, strange footprints that head out of town towards the barn, then they're definitely gonna go check it out. It still surprises me every time what a big difference it makes to give 2 or more clues. Sometimes I'll give what I think is a really juicy clue to my players, but then they slot it way down on their priority list of things to do. But as soon as I give them a second clue that points to the same place, it instantly bumps it to the top of their priorities. Before I share an easy way to make sure your mysteries are the perfect difficulty so they won't be solved instantly, but they also won't stump your players, I need to share a tip that I learned the hard way. Don't put red herrings in your TTRPG mysteries. Your players are going to have a hard enough time following the plot as is. In a book, red herrings are a useful tool to throw the reader off the scent and prevent them from solving the mystery too quickly. But in a book, the author controls how much time you as the reader will be spending on the red herring. In a TTRPG, if you give your players false clues, you have no way to control how much time they invest into following those false threads. And once they have a theory in their mind, it can be very difficult to give them enough clues for them to formulate a new theory. Also, if they spend a bunch of time chasing down a false lead, only to find out that it was a waste of time, that's way less satisfying than just adding more layers to your original mystery. Which leads me to my tip about mystery complexity. In order to make a good D&D mystery, just add layers.
Onions have layers.
All of your clues should be pretty obvious about where they lead to next. The mystery shouldn't require any wild deductions or huge leaps to solve. It should just require getting all or most of the clues. You can control how complex a mystery is by just adding more layers between your players and the conclusion. Need a more complex mystery that takes longer? Just add more steps between the start and the end. For example, in the Divine Assassins one-shot, the players start out knowing that they're looking for a missing cleric and that there are people abducting villagers. Other than complete luck, there's no reason for them to guess that the abducted villagers are in the storehouse. They need to find each clue in the chain that leads them to the storehouse eventually. If I wanted to make the mystery longer, I could just change the starting clue. Maybe the deity doesn't know which town this is happening in, but they tell the players to go to the last town where this happened. There, they could find reports and descriptions of the villains. Then they could find a coach driver who saw the 2 villains on the road to Thorncrest. On the road to Thorncrest, the characters could meet someone from Thorncrest who tells them a cleric spark has gone missing. You get the idea. Adding more layers means your players can't instantly solve it by making a deduction, and it also means that they'll never get stumped because each clue is pretty obvious and doesn't require making any big leaps. This applies to mystery campaigns, but it also applies to any type of campaign planning. If you want to make a campaign last longer, just keep adding layers and steps between your players and their final goal. Speaking of a final goal, and potentially some high-level gameplay, do you make a creation story for your campaign worlds? Check out this video here to see why I found it helpful to make a creation story for my worlds to make high-level play easier. I appreciate you.